Welcome back to another episode of Windows and Mirrors. In today's episode, we have second-year undergraduate Thomas Manglona, who is from the Island of Rota, discussing his life back home, addressing misconceptions of his ethnicity that he has faced, and his interest in news reporting. This is his story.
I'm from the Northern Mariana Islands. It's in the Western Pacific. Most people will know where I'm from when I say that I'm from the island above Guam. So I grew up in the Island of Rota. It's right above Guam, and I was born on Guam, actually, and for most of my life I was raised on those islands throughout the Mariana Islands, and I went to high school on Saipan, which is another island in the chain. And so home is a great place to be. It's really, full of culture of the islands, of the native Chamorro people, of the Carolinian people, of really where everyone goes to start a life as well. We have lots of other folks who are visiting and who decide to move to the islands and start a life there. It's a very welcoming place, and there's a lot of rich culture and heritage that you grow up with, and I can only describe it as one big family. Family is one of the most important things back home, and everyone's supporting each other, and whenever something good happens, everyone on the island knows. Yeah, it's a really tight-knit community. Everyone knows what everyone else is up to in terms of, all the good things going on with each other. I remember when I first got the news to get into Berkeley, there were some people who I didn't even know yet who congratulated me at the coffee shop, at the store, and I'm like, thank you so much. And so I feel like that experience itself speaks to kind of how tight-knit the community is in terms of everyone celebrates each other's success in life.
What's kind of like a memory that you always cherish from home?
What immediately comes to mind is my grandfather and grandmother, Prudencio and Bernadita Manglona. And my grandfather was actually the first elected mayor of the island, and so he helped literally lay the foundation for the island in terms of our roads and different buildings and community centers. I mention both of my grandparents because they would take all of their grandchildren every weekend to a chapel called Santa Lourdes, and it was about maybe 40-minute drive. They had a blue van. It was a sky blue van, so everyone knew it was their car. I think it was also one of the few vans on the island that looked like that. But it fit all of us. It fit all of the cousins, and so my grandfather and grandmother had 12 children. I have about 40 first cousins, and so it was a big family. I'm actually on the young end of that. And so every weekend my grandfather and grandmother would take us to this chapel. We'd say a prayer. We'd touch the photos of our loved ones who've passed away who went there, and we'd tell stories about our family and, what's going on in our personal lives as well. And then after that, we'd drive another 30 minutes or so to the farm, my grandfather's ranch, to give the cows water and pick some fruit and eat it. One of the things that I always remember was picking this, one of the plants that was called sugarcane, and the juices that came out of it when you bit into it tasted like sugar cane. And so I remember wanting and asking my grandfather every time we go to that farm, especially after doing all that driving, and it's usually a hot day back home. And so that's one thing I remember most about my childhood. My grandfather and grandmother really always wanting us to be with each other and having a good time. And with a big family of like ours, everyone was willing to do something sometime, so I really enjoyed that.
What are kind of the often misconceptions a lot of people have about students who come from the islands?
The thing that I deal with as an islander is kind of being looked to speak for people who are from the islands, and I can't speak to what it's like to be a native Hawaiian or a Samoan or a Tongan or fill in any Pacific Islander name here. And I think that's another thing for people to consider is, ask questions if you don't know, and we're all not just one monolith. We're all unique in our islands.
What got you into wanting to do news reporting?
Why I got involved, I remember as a kid, I'd wake up every morning at 6 a.m. and Christiane Amanpour on CNN would be on. And there were other cartoons, but for some reason I always stuck on Channel 7. And for us, Channel 7 shared both ABC, Fox, and then I think there were other channels that also had CNN. And so we only had about 23 channels on the island. And I think it's still that way now. CNN was one of them. And I saw Christiane Amanpour. We get CNN International. And I saw her reading the news every day at 6 a.m. And I saw her interview style, very fearless, in how she interviewed world powers, and I wanted to be Christiane Amanpour. And in addition to that, I started noticing, especially when I got into middle school, that a lot of people got away with different things that I saw Christiane Amanpour reporting on as a reporter. And as a result of Christiane Amanpour's reporting, these people were caught. And what I saw on the island was a lot of people not being held to account because there was no newspaper, there was no television news station, there was no reporter on island. And I saw the really real world consequences of not having a journalist in your community, not having a watchdog. And since then, I started my own small blog as a 7th grader. And I remember writing different stories every week. And Lord, I think like my sister was the only person who read what I wrote. And a few people after when I shared it, I remember making homemade business cards myself and passing that around with a link to my blog. And I think I used it was some weird blog that had a really weird name, and that would be on the card. But I started writing myself. And then by the time I moved to the larger island, Saipan, for high school, one of the local publishers and editors of the regional magazine took notice of my blog. I gave her my homemade business card, and she responded saying, "Hey, do you want to work for us?" And I said, "Oh, sure." And that really springboarded everything else that followed in terms of what I was able to do. And later on working for ABC7, Fox 6, for the regional networks in the Mariana Islands, all of that kind of leading up to that moment when we were hit by a super typhoon and the station was looking for someone to cover it. And I was the only person willing to, devote that time and resource as a young person to cover the aftermath of Super Typhoon Sudalor, it was called. And so that's kind of like a nutshell of what happened in those 4 years after I started my blog. And so, but it was really noticing the effects of not having a journalist that living in your community, and what that means.
Anything we should check out for you in regards to what you're doing?
Next year, Carlos Ortega and I will be the executive directors of Cal TV, and we're really trying to, deliver news, sports, and entertainment to the Berkeley community. And we hope that you can tune in. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. We're really upping our game in terms of what coverage we provide and how we engage with the Berkeley audience. This is such a great time to be a student journalist, especially at Berkeley, where so many important conversations are happening. And we're here really to have a first-person point of view and help write that draft of what happens here. And so I would just encourage everyone to tune in to Cal TV and definitely listen to the stories. And if they have stories that they want us to share, reach out to us. And don't be afraid to tell your truth and speak your story to the Berkeley community and really the wider audience. Our audience is always expanding, and so we look forward to hearing from everyone.
This has been another episode of Windows and Mirrors. I am your host, Gabriel Gonzalez. Thanks for listening.